Hey y'all, I'm Reese, and welcome to Making Meaning. Making Meaning is here to guide you along your path to make meaning in a way that makes sense for you. This week, I am joined by my amazing friend from high school, Lauren Bush. Lauren is a recent grad from Washington University of St. Louis with her multifaceted degree in philosophy, neuroscience, psychology, and German. This next year, Lauren will be a Fullbright English teaching assistant in Germany, continuing her research in philosophy, which is just crazy cool. If y'all aren't familiar with being a Fullbright scholar, it is a crazy honor. So that is just like one of the coolest accolades someone can ever get, and the fact that she gets to go to Germany to research philosophy is absolutely epic. So I'm really glad we got a chance to sit down and just chit-chat and catch up before we're no longer in the same country, sadly. So Lauren is not only one of the most fun people I know, who I laugh constantly with, but she also intellectually challenges me in a way that is so rare to find in friendships. She is one of my friends who I can have ridiculously deep conversations with and then immediately start joking around about something completely off topic. And I think that is really reflected in this episode and in our conversation. This episode has a lot of chaotic energy to it, but I think it made it really fun and easier to talk about some of these topics that we got into during this hour. Lauren is just an example of how having conversations like this aren't a chore. They're fun and insightful at the same time, and I certainly gained a lot from chatting with Lauren, and I hope you all gained something from this episode too. So let's take a deep breath and jump into it. Hello, Lauren. How are you?
I'm good. Having a pretty chill day.
Good.
Yeah, it's cloudy, so I don't have to worry about getting as sunburned.
Yeah.
I did wear my sunscreen today, so that's good. But yeah, pretty good day. We had a little brunch, which was wonderful.
It was wonderful. Yeah. It's been a while, so it was good. It was good to catch up. So before we really get started with our conversation, I am just going to ask you, what is something you're grateful for right now?
Maybe I would say inner strength.
Ooh.
I guess just because I've been dealing with some troubling
some things that require inner strength.
Friendships, yeah. Some energy vampires, if you will.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm grateful that I'm sticking up for myself, which is not always easy. But yeah, that's my thing today.
I'm glad. I love to hear that. That's beautiful. So to kind of kickstart our conversation, tell me your story, whatever that means for you, in as little or as many words as you want.
Okay. In how much detail?
Up to you.
All right. Well, my name's Lauren. Reese and I met in high school, and yeah, we were both heavily influenced by this particular English teacher, and in that class, that kind of sparked my interest in philosophy and poetry. So I pursued those interests more in college at WashU, and yeah, eventually I hope to be a philosophy professor and kind of encourage other people to ask questions and maybe impose some existential crises on my students. That's always fun. But yeah, and next year I'm going to Germany to teach English, or assist teaching English as a Fulbright ETA. So I'm really looking forward to that. But yeah, in a nutshell, I'm a proud nerd. That's about it, yeah.
I love it. Lauren, you're such just a wonderful person inside and out, and so I'm really glad that we can chat. So obviously, like, philosophy was something that we were both really, we both had an understanding of it before meeting Mr. Jones, but, like, obviously he, like, really brought that out in us.
Yeah.
What was something from that class that you still think about today that you were like, that was, like, crazy and changed, like, everything?
Yeah, so really the first groundbreaking moment, we read Rilke's Ninth Uno Eulogy, which I actually have tattooed on my arm. But yeah, that poem instantly, I don't know, it really resonated with me because in language, Rilke questions language, and you know, this idea that language is the only medium that we have to express ourselves outside of ourselves as human beings, but at the end of the day, it always falls short of, like, a perfect translation of that experience.
Yeah.
So kind of grappling with that intersection between this is all we have.
Yeah. And it's also never good enough.
It's never good enough, but it also is incredible that we even have something like that. Of course, there are, like, the arts, which is another way to communicate that kind of thing. But yeah, that question just really stuck with me, and kind of informed the way that I approached philosophy initially in college.
Yeah.
I also learned about Heidegger's being in time in that class, which has been the source of many epiphanies and headaches as well. But yeah, that one poem was kind of the first thing that really got me thinking about those philosophical questions, and in, like, a medium that was still artistic.
Yeah. So, language. What about language do you think sets it apart from the other arts and the sense of, like, being able to describe experience?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, I used to dance a lot. I used to want to be a professional dancer in high school, and then I like broke both my knees, so that was not gonna happen. But for the longest time when I was younger, that kind of was my communication medium of choice, because it isn't in language. I don't know, it's not that language is better than the arts, it's just, like, a different aspect of existence is communicated in something like a dance performance or, like, a visual artwork or something, where it's unspoken, but it still communicates a feeling. And sometimes that type of communication is, I guess, more accurate than language. But I think the act of trying to put it in language is something that, you know, it is the medium we use to communicate every day. And so kind of stepping up to that challenge of trying to express the inexpressible.
There's something about the discursivity of it that's, like, makes it more difficult, but also maybe more meaningful. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but...
No, yeah, something like that. Because then, I mean, personally, I think that philosophy is always something that's dialectical. Like, it always happens in dialogue.
Yeah.
At least for me, that's where the most insights come from, is dialogue with others. And that is in language, and it's kind of through grappling with those, you know, with that challenge of trying to explain what's going on in your mind. It's extremely difficult, but I think also very fulfilling. Yeah. If you can have that type of conversation with others. Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you think that grappling with these questions of life and being and existence through language has impacted the way you personally live your life?
What do you mean by that?
So, like, because during lunch we were talking about how, like, after Joan's class we both feel like the trajectory of our lives, like, completely shifted and changed.
Yeah.
And for me, it was, like, even just the way that, like, I walk through the world felt like it was with a different...
Yeah.
Comportment?
Comportment, yes. Yes, comportment.
Yes, comportment. Pop off comportment. So stupid.
Oh,
but for you, like, what does that look like? How do those daily things, or maybe, like, not necessarily ritual or habitual things, but, like, how has that shifted your engagement with your life?
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think kind of my interest in language and my personal feeling that it's almost like the impossible obligation, as Jones would call it, our English teacher, to attempt to express the inexpressible of human existence in this flawed medium. So in my everyday life, I guess that understanding that language is flawed, that at the end of the day, these are human, like, creations, these labels, you know, water bottle, microphone.
Yeah.
We've created those concepts. And so I guess you could describe that as, oh, well, these labels are flawed because they're our creation. But then on the other hand, there's also a different way you could describe that as, like, well, we created meaning. Like, we brought this new meaning to this random collection of particles in space, if you're privy to a corpuscular universe. But anyways, yeah, I guess kind of the idea that language is a flawed medium that we're kind of obliged to use and explore ideas in, kind of manifests for me in the everyday as the understanding that I'm the sole arbiter of meaning in my life. And that's terrifying.
Yeah.
But it's also, you know, an opportunity to live your life authentically, whatever that may mean to you, knowing that, you know, you get to decide, you get to have a say in what your purpose is, what meaning is for you. Kind of like the existentialist type of vibe.
Yeah.
And on the day-to-day, I guess on a more concrete level, let's get down from the abstract. Sorry.
No, I love it.
Yeah, I guess in the everyday, what that looks like for me is really trying to be mindful and really live in the moment. Because even in boring stuff, you know, just kind of sitting around looking at the clouds, I don't know.
Yeah.
It seems very, like, trivial, but you have the power to imbue every experience you have with meaning.
Yeah.
And even learn from it.
Almost learning from yourself.
Yeah,
in that way.
Yeah.
That is so interesting. So, going back to something you said at the beginning, this impossible obligation. When did you realize that that was a mantle that you had to take up? Because I think that while you and I both agree that it is an obligation,
right,
I think very few people actually engage with it in that way.
Yeah.
So what do you think is the difference there? If that makes sense, without that coming across as, like, judgmental, because it's just a different mode of living, but,
yeah,
you know.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, just reading that one poem from Rilke, like, in a way, that obligation almost became, like, religion to me in a way. Like, it did become a way of living, like, in my everyday life.
Yeah.
And especially this idea of, like, the poet as the mediator between the mundane and the divine, kind of trying to express these divine, like, ideas or feelings in a very down-to-earth type of way.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. It just, to me, it feels like bridging the gap between two aspects of existence, one of which maybe is less, important to most people in the day-to-day, like the divine, kind of abstract stuff that doesn't really concern most people in the everyday type of stuff.
Yeah.
I don't really know where I'm going with this, but...
No,
Yeah, it's like the impossible obligation. Like, it's really hard to explain, but, I don't know.
Yeah, that's
it just...
I'm certainly not looking for a perfect answer by any means.
I don't think I can give you a perfect answer to that question.
So, break down this concept of, like, poet as mediator between the divine and the real, because I think that's something that we both kind of, I think, feel. Would you say that in that, I guess, metaphor, you feel as though you are the poet and that is how you live your life? And if so, can you break those concepts down a little bit?
Yeah, I definitely try to live as the mediator in my day-to-day life. I mean, I do love writing poetry, but in a more everyday type of way, when I'm not writing poetry, to me that kind of looks like trying to merge two aspects of my own existence into the present moment. I'm a Libra. I don't know if this really means anything, but, kind of, some people say that Libras tend to, fall to one extreme or the other, with the scales being off balance and such. And early in my life, kind of late middle school, early high school, I would go through these phases of being really on top of, like, my physical health, my eating healthy, getting good sleep, being really productive at school. And then another phase of getting really in my head, really, like, cerebral thoughts constantly, focusing on spirituality, on meditation.
These two different aspects of, like, extremely physical versus extremely, like, metaphysical.
Exactly. And I eventually realized or admitted to myself that wasn't going to work. Because, if you ignore one, then it's going to impede your ability to develop the other, at least in my personal experience. So kind of trying to merge those two aspects of my own development and my own self-improvement is something I'm always working on.
Yeah,
but,
of course. I mean,
that's definitely the goal for me.
It's a never-ending kind of thing.
Like,
I feel like
it'll never be perfect.
Yeah, I feel like if you've been like, I did it, you kind of missed the point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But what do you think it is about the concept of the poet as mediator that calls to you? Because I'm like, it goes back a little bit to our conversation of language and how the poet kind of mediates these two aspects of life through language. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of interesting because I don't know if this is Rilke. I'm pretty sure it's Holderlin, the As on a Holiday one.
Yeah.
Kind of the idea that, is the poet the mediator or kind of like a false prophet? It's a little bit of both, but in a way I think it's, in my experience reading Rilke's poetry, I don't know. The power of the poet is being able to facilitate a type of thinking where that type of merging of these two aspects of life can come together. Kind of those existential questions, like, well, what is the meaning of language? What's the meaning of life, Why are we here? What are we supposed to do while we're here? All those angsty boy questions.
Yeah. Boy spelled B-O-I, of course.
Of course, yeah. Obviously. But I think poetry has its power in being able to facilitate that mode of questioning that maybe other art forms, for me, didn't really immediately kind of
take you there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Super interesting. So it's almost like there's this mirror relationship between the poet engaging with language and you, the human being, engaging with life.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a nice way to put it.
Okay, cool. I love that. So then going back to this kind of like the scales and balancing, have you always felt like there are these two different dimensions of your life for like Lauren, whatever Lauren means, right? But that it's like these are these two aspects. Has it always felt like that? Because I think something that I struggle with in thinking about these things is the difference between balancing the duality and multiplicity, and what's the difference there, and how do those different concepts inform each other, but also
kind of oppose each other.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I have the same problem, and for me, I guess duality is just an easy way of talking about these things. You know, it's kind of the easy way out, but at the end of the day, I personally think on a metaphysical level, it's much more of a spectrum, you know, like nothing's just black and white. And I think for me early on, trying to better myself from a standpoint of duality almost made it more difficult, because it was kind of trying to merge these two separate pieces of the puzzle. But if you can approach what looks like a duality from a standpoint of just kind of a unity that's been divided in these human concepts, then it's almost easier.
So it's almost like when putting it into language, duality is an easier way to kind of talk about it.
Right.
But when putting it into practice, approaching it with the mindset of unity, multiplicity, kind of feels more accurate.
Yeah, more organic for me.
Organic's a good word.
I mean, it's a problem I see in philosophy all the time. I personally, the jury's still out for me whether each and every one of us has like a soul, you know?
Yeah.
I like to think of it more as just like an energy that we're all kind of taking part in. We all have a little piece of it, versus like little soul for each of us,
right?
You know, that stays there.
This one's for you.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, there is this concept of a soul, and kind of creating a term for it as its own separate thing makes it really easy to fall into a pattern of thinking that it is its own separate thing.
Well, and even if it began as this kind of understanding of like, well, we are all imbued with soul that is maybe this like fingertips of God's existence kind of thing that we're all taking part in, but in using language to try and describe it, but going back again, like language falling short in accurately describing the experience of soul, could it have been almost mistranslated and miscommunicated into being like, oh, this is my soul that I own. This is my thing that makes me me. It is mine. As opposed to like, no, we all participate in this communal thing, but how we talk about things inherently defines the things themselves.
Exactly. Yeah, I think mistranslated is a really good word for it.
Yeah. So, I love that. Go for it.
I'm quite parched.
No, please drink your water. Yeah. Okay, so not totally switching gears, but something that I always think about in terms of like multiplicity versus duality, I always think of Library of Babel and how
my favorite.
Which I know, it's a short story by Jorge Luis Borges, who is a Spanish author, yes?
I think he's
Argentinian.
Yes.
Okay, yes.
I think so.
But he writes originally in Spanish.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting too in terms of like translation with that like neither of us speaks Spanish, so we can't actually read the original.
Right. Yep.
Like, we're only reading a translation, so that's already, like, an interesting point of separation.
Oh, yeah.
But in Library of Babel, Borges describes, like, this room with the mirrors on the side, and then eventually, Lauren just pointed at her tattoo.
Yeah, I have a
Library
tattoo
of
of, like, you know, how he describes each gallery. And I remember we would spend hours
drawing
the galleries, trying to figure out how the library would actually look.
Yeah.
So
that literally was like...
That was so fun.
Those are so fun. And I remember, like, when we, like, reached this moment in creative writing class, actually with Mr. G.
Oh,
and we had to, like, run to Mr. Jones' class.
Yeah, we're like, we figured it
Yeah, we figured out the
so
library.
funny.
Even though, like, obviously we didn't. But it was, like...
I
We're
forgot
geniuses.
about that. That was so funny.
Yeah, but we would try and
We were always
draw
so
it.
loud in that class. And the stats class was always like, hey, we're actually trying to do work.
Back to Library of Babel and
Yeah.
duality. So I think for me, reading that short story was one of the first things that I was like, whoa. Borges is describing this thing that feels very like, this is the one entity. But then he says something and it, like, breaks it open. And it's like,
Yeah.
actually, it's layered on top of each other and outwardly from each other. And it's also described as hexagon, which, of course, hexagons are the only, like, naturally occurring shape in nature, like bananas and beehives.
What? Oh!
Bananas originally, the only reason they're
What?
not hexagons now is because of, like,
GMOs.
GMOs, yeah.
I did not know that. Wow.
So, it's, like, the only naturally occurring organic geometric shape, which is really interesting. But of course, that can expand outward infinitely because
Right.
hexagons can all fit into each other and on top of each other.
Yeah.
And then twist and
Yeah.
layer within each other and getting smaller within themselves and bigger outside of themselves. So, in that sense, like, breaking open this whole thing that is like, whoa, it is actually within us, without us, around us, surrounding us. Insert Geyer. So
Another tiny cup.
tell me all of your thoughts about that kind of stuff that is like these concepts of constant expansion
Yeah.
and contraction within these things and what that means for you in your life.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I have 2 points on this. I mean, to tie it back to the duality thing, I think something Borges does that kind of harks back to this point is he sets up contradictions constantly in that story.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
he'll say the library is both finite and infinite.
Yes.
And in equating the two, which are clearly opposites in their, you know, meaning, he kind of does away with the duality altogether.
The idea that they're... Yeah.
Yeah. Like, the contradiction creates a space where it's meaningless.
Right.
You know, and you have to find another framework to define what he's talking about. Which is part of the reason I find the story so interesting.
Yeah.
Because you kind of have to approach it with a new frame of mind
Yeah.
than we're used to on the day-to-day. I mean, you know, people tend to fall back into black or white thinking, you know,
Yeah.
like it's yes or no, this or that, right or wrong, all those things. So, yeah. But on another note, what was I talking? Oh, yeah, the Geyer thing.
The Geyer thing. Because I think of these two concepts as very similar. So for our listeners, the Geyer is a shape that a lot of different things move in. It's spelled Gyre, and it is like the helix of your DNA is a Geyer, but it also is the way that our solar system moves around the sun, and then that solar system moves within the Milky Way. So it is a shape that is replicated very often and on similarly, excuse you, kind of rude of that car to interrupt,
kind of rude
honestly.
to honk at us like that.
Yeah, like kind of aggressive.
Yeah.
Wow. But I think of the concept of the Geyer and how, like, that's literally our DNA, but also our solar system in that same shape, and that is like a scientifically proven fact.
Yeah.
As similar to the same concept of the hexagon of the Library of Babel.
Yeah. It's really interesting because, you know, at the beginning he says something something where the reader understands that the library is kind of like a metaphor for the universe.
Right.
So it's almost like a metaphysical account of the universe in the way that he's describing the library as, you know, kind of this Geyer structure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, but it's definitely tricky because, at least for me, I used to really be into these types of questions, and, you know, William Butler Yeats has a vision where he talks about Geyers and all that fun stuff.
And how they all interact, and
as like the structure of the universe and of the progression of time. And I used to be really into sacred geometry and all that fun stuff. And I still am. I'm still very interested in it. But I think I used to approach it as an attempt to find the truth, capital T truth, of the structure of the universe. And, well, not just the structure, but I guess the meaning of it, or how time progresses, the patterns, what meaningful patterns there are.
Because surely if there's this thing that is replicated millions of times, then it must... Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah. And I still find that very interesting, but I think in my own philosophical investigations now, it's much less about finding definite answers, because I think as soon as you do that,
you've lost
it's
the
no
point.
longer philosophy.
Yeah.
You know? Obviously, I want to get closer to answers, but it's more about asking questions for me and encouraging other people to take up those same questions.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. So something you said earlier that I kind of want to draw back into this conversation is that these kinds of questions and asking these questions has become your religion in a certain way. Tell me what that looks like, because obviously that's not like an organized religion, but it's your own kind of developed thing, that asking these kinds of questions and having these kinds of conversations feels like a religious experience.
Yeah, it really does to me. I think the religious feeling of it happens more in the day-to-day of being able to be present in the moment and just enjoy the little things, you know, returning to nature, enjoying that, just kind of unplugging from time to time. So I feel like the religious aspect of it for me is more so like my connection to nature and that feeling of unity that's already there between the human being and nature. But yeah, I don't know, my brain's kind of farting out at this point. You get lost in the jargon, and then your brain just short circuits.
It's
like,
kind of true.
Can you use normal words now? Just for...
And literally saying the words Library of Babel and Geyer as though they have any meaning, but they...
Oh, but they do!
But they do! But it's like, that's... Language. It goes back to language. And but, like, it so does. And even, like, us having this conversation reflecting the difficulty of what we're talking about.
Yeah, it's the impossible obligation.
Yeah, that, like, we want to be having this conversation, but literally in the midst of trying to describe that feeling, it's like, okay, now I have that feeling, and I cannot, like, my brain literally short circuits.
Yeah, you can't express it.
Yeah.
It's a challenge, but, yeah,
but it's an obligation.
That was comprehensible, but I lost it. Yeah.
That's quite all right. It'll come back. Do you want to think about it for a second?
What was your question again? Something about...
Yeah. So how have these...
I guess it's less religious and more so it gives my life purpose.
Religion gives a lot of people meaning.
Yeah.
So in that way, I think you could say it's a religion.
Right.
But...
Yeah, I would agree with that.
But something that gives your life purpose.
Right, because at the end of the day, I will live and I will die without knowing for certain whether I
Yeah.
have the right answers, the right understanding of life, the
Yeah.
meaning of life. You know, I might arrive at some answer, but there's nothing in this world that can confirm my truth as the capital T truth.
Yeah. Period. End of sentence. Full stop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, you know, I don't want to fall into, you know, the whole postmodernist idea that there's no truth at all.
Right.
But at the end of the day, you can never be certain. And so getting others to ask questions and ask me questions
Yeah.
even, and challenge my own pre-existing beliefs and opinions about the world and myself, not only reflects that fact, I guess, that we can never really confirm whether our truth is the truth.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. For me, it gives me purpose because it facilitates that same type of thinking that I was talking about earlier, where you can realize, like, oh shit, the world is basically meaningless.
Yeah.
You know? But then from that, you can take a stand on that meaning.
Yeah, very
say,
Albert Camus.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
like, we've completely deconstructed everything.
Mm-hmm.
What are you gonna do now?
Exactly. And yeah, I love absurdism.
I do too. Well, because at a certain point, I think conversations like this kind of do devolve into absurdism.
Oh, yeah.
You have to have, one, a sense of humor, I think, in approaching, like, the ridiculousness.
How absurd life is.
Yeah, of the fact that, like, we're here talking about that. Like, it literally is mind-boggling. But then to be able to say, okay, but that doesn't mean I'm just going to
give up and cry about it.
Right.
And be like, oh, everything's meaningless.
Yeah.
I'll just be a emo my whole life,
Yeah,
I guess.
right.
I'll get some clip-in colored hair extensions.
Are you coming for middle school Reese right now?
Oh, I'm coming from middle school Lauren right now. I love those things.
Yeah.
I'd wear the low pony right in the middle.
Right in the middle.
With the clip-in.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe leave the clip-in out.
Yeah. Pull it down to
Oh, yeah.
the face framing, you know? Perfect.
So bad.
But it's like, then being able to take charge of what that means for you, while knowing that
It's
that
for you,
definition
yeah.
for you, so let me ask you this.
Mm-hmm.
In the sense of the importance of finding what that means for you, because that's kind of the purpose behind this podcast, everything that I'm doing, I really want to push people to be like,
Yeah.
what is that for you? You
Right.
have to take ownership of that, because otherwise, in my opinion, there is no point in living this life if you are not doing that.
True.
Like, which sounds really extreme, but
I mean,
like,
I would agree with that.
but it's like, I believe it. You have to find that impossible obligation, whatever it looks like for you.
Exactly.
How do you reconcile your personal truth that you found, which of course changes and
Right.
grows and does different things over time, with the idea that, like, on some level, that is truth because it is your personal truth. However, is it capital T truth? And the difference between those two truths, because I think they are different truths.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And both of them maybe change. What's the relationship between them for you?
Oh, man. I mean, I guess you could say the lowercase t truth kind of is whatever living authentically means to you.
Okay.
You know, for me, that will mean writing poetry, teaching, you know, studying philosophy. That does not mean that that is the only way to live authentically for everyone. And I think recognizing that there's no certainty in finding the capital T truth, and that you have to define your own truth and meaning in this life, I think something really important that comes from that, just in terms of, like, social interactions, is, for me, it's enabled me to be more accepting of individual differences, you know, whether that be religious, political views,
yeah,
nationality, I don't know, anything really, because in that sense of personal authenticity, there's no one single answer to that.
Yeah, being able to kind of accept and honor the difference in how other people are finding their truth.
Yeah, so to me, if you've given your life purpose and you're happy and, you know, we're different.
Cool.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because, you know, in that sense of personal, everyday life, that truth is going to look different.
Yeah.
So I think learning to accept that and respect that is something, especially in the States. We could do a little bit better at this point in time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is interesting how these really big questions do inherently boil down to changing the way you operate in your daily life and how you engage with other people.
Oh, yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your daily practices that you feel like, because I know you talked a little bit about like meditating and really focusing on being present, and how writing poetry and pursuing teaching are things that really make you feel like you're honoring your purpose. Mm-hmm. What are other things? Now I do want to hear more about that daily grind of the obligation. So what are things that like you've kind of employed to help figure that out and feel like you're doing the thing?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it takes place in an academic context.
Sure.
Not all of it, but for me, school has been a very fulfilling experience. Mm-hmm. I know there are a lot of problems with higher education. I know there's some corruption, but I think for me, that experience of coming together in a place with other people from all around the country, all around the world, with completely different viewpoints as me, and sitting down to have a conversation about it, I don't know, to me, that's just always been a very fulfilling experience.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess in the day-to-day, having conversations with people that have different opinions than me, you know, learning from others, wanting to, I mean, I want to be a teacher, an actual teacher, but in my everyday life, I try to be both a teacher and a student, because everyone you meet is a potential teacher. Yeah. If you're willing to listen and be open to, you know,
learning,
to their ideas and to what they have to say.
Yeah.
So that kind of stuff, you know.
What are some, like, tangible things that, like, if you... I'm
like, always in the abstract.
I know, but no, I'm like, if there's someone out there who is like, this Lauren girl, I think she's onto something. What does she do, like, that I should start trying to do?
Oh, man. I mean, I would just say, you know, talk with all kinds of people, I guess. Yeah. That's the easiest thing to do, really. Is just to have conversations with people that you know you disagree with. But not in a way to, you know, have a debate or try to figure out who's right and who's wrong, but to learn from each other.
Just stay open.
Yeah, and try to, like, approach a closer type of truth, if you want to call it that, together. Yeah, I mean, I say have conversations. I'm not antisocial by choice, but, you know, a lot of people don't want to hear. Lauren. A lot of people don't want to hear about all this mumbo jumbo.
It is hard to find people to have conversations like this with, but that I think is also something that in my own life I have worked on. Is even if the style of conversation doesn't feel like this one,
for sure,
it doesn't mean you can't apply the learnings to this type of stuff.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, for sure. And going back to what we talked about earlier, kind of these two, you know, the spiritual, cerebral side of self-improvement, and then, like, the very not mundane, but, very concrete ways that you can do that. And ideally, those don't have to be separate.
Right. Being able to identify the connection there.
Yeah. So even just having a conversation with someone about, I don't know.
Yeah.
Something, it doesn't have to be abstract all the time.
Right.
Because most people will be asleep. They'll fall asleep.
Well, and also,
I
think we're really lucky that we have a shared body of knowledge because we did
we
go
can
to high
just
school
be like,
together.
the impossible obligation.
Yeah, well, and we're
like,
remember this short story and this poem that we both have read? Obviously we have this, thing
shared context.
Right, that we can draw from to talk about this stuff, and I think we're lucky in that way.
Oh, yeah.
But that does provide a little bit of a barrier in having abstract conversations if you don't have a shared language.
Right.
But there is some way, I think, to be the mediating poet in those conversations where maybe you are just talking about, connecting with people is really important. Okay, well, what does that mean metaphysically for you?
Even just, metaphysically?
Just for instance, but I mean, if you want to answer that question, go for it. But that was more of just an example.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Actually, I have another question I want to ask you.
Okay.
So going back to this kind of concept of creating your own religion, purpose, meaning, how would you define God?
Oof. That is a wonderful question, Reese. Great question. Yeah, for me, I don't know. I personally don't believe that God is... there's this idea that we're created in God's image, and I don't think that has to mean that God is, somehow, like an anthropomorphic God? I can't... That word's so hard to say.
Yeah, that is kind of a hard word to say.
Anthropomorphic God. Some dude with a beard up in the sky.
Or even something humanoid.
Yeah, some type of deity or anything like that. To me, God kind of encapsulates this idea that everything is everything. And my mom is pretty religious now. And the other day she was like, oh, well, do you ever pray? And I said, well, not in the way that you might think, not in the way that most people define it. Mm-hmm. And I know this will sound conceited at first, but I'll explain. I said to her, well, if I was to pray to God, I'd essentially be praying to myself and to everyone else and to everything, because to me, I like to call it the divine because that's much more ambiguous to me.
Yeah.
But it's everything, you know? Not just life. I guess everything is life.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just everything together and the fact that I'm in it, part of it.
Yeah.
Not as a separate thing. I mean, in my everyday life, yes.
Right. But
in the big scheme of things, I'm a part of this greater system.
Yeah. It almost makes me think a little bit about, fire. So if you were to have this big cue fire dance moves that Lauren just...
Did some little dances.
Yeah, some little dances. But if you were to have this, huge bonfire in front of you, and then everyone has their own candle, and, lights their candle on fire, it doesn't take away from the size of the bonfire, nor does it...
Yeah.
Put it out. You're not taking anything away from it, but it's still the same fire.
Ooh, I like
on
that.
your candle, right? So it's almost like this, you're a part of it, but also if you weren't, you wouldn't be changing what fire is.
Yes.
But also, you are a part of that fire.
Yeah, I like that. That's a really nice, mental picture of it, I think. Yeah, you say fingertips of
God's existence.
Yeah, no, I think that's kind of, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
It's not really a separate entity.
Yeah.
In my personal...
Yeah. And
definition.
I tend to agree with that, but also not everyone will. But I do think that there's this really cool thing that's like, even like in inanimate objects, like atoms are still moving and shaking with energy, you know? It's like, and that is the same energy that we as animate objects are moving and shaking with.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, so what is that? Why is there a difference there? And
right.
what is that kind of thing that is that energy that is divine in everything?
Yeah. Even like a piece of garbage.
Yeah.
That's still part of it.
Yeah, that is still...
Yeah.
You see a banana peel on the road.
It's like, wow.
That's God.
Yeah, and I mean, I know it's just like a visual aspect of existence, but I paint in my free time just for funsies.
For funsies.
Oil painting, to be precise. But I don't know, kind of that practice of looking really closely at an image. I do like realism stuff. My attempt at realism. And kind of observing the colors and the patterns. Because if you look really closely at something, like a portrait, for example, it's not just like skin tone. You know, there's like blues and greens and purples. And all these colors that if you, like, in the gestalt sort of full picture, don't really come
they fade
through.
Away.
Yeah, but just kind of looking closely at things like that and seeing that, you know, having a sense of wonder towards even the banana peel on the ground. I mean, I'd probably just step over it, to be honest, but you know, that's just kind of a random example. But I think maintaining that sense of wonder towards the world and not just, you know, stopping at the concepts themselves, like banana peel.
Right.
And kind of seeing it as shapes and colors and just existence.
Yeah. Like it is.
People are probably listening to this like, what is a banana peel?
What? Like, did they?
Are they
okay?
got
lunch before? Did they smoke before?
Did they smoke?
Is that what
are y'all on?
Yeah.
Listen, I'm not out here worshiping banana peels, I can assure you.
Well, speak for yourself. Just kidding. But, I mean, well, I'm like, in some ways, maybe. Yeah, who knows? But, I mean, I think that it's like your own interpretation of it. So, and I think also these feel like very, like, weird things to say, you know? But I think we actually see them reflected in a lot of other religions that just, again, uses different language. Like, even in, like, the Judeo-Christian sense that, like, God is in everyone, right?
Yeah.
Like, that has been a very normalized thing to say. I think this just takes it a little bit of a step further that has that sense of wonder about, okay, what does that mean that God is in everyone?
Yeah. Like,
you know?
even not only sentient beings.
Right.
Maybe other stuff, too.
Yeah.
I've started, this is kind of random.
Do it.
And people are really going to think I'm on something now. But lately, I've been looking at trees and thinking, I kind of feel like that's a person trapped in there. I don't know why.
That's kind of scary.
It's so scary. I hope it's not. I hope it's not true, because that would suck. I mean, it would be cool to be a tree, but to be like, I'm trapped, I can't move. If there's a forest fire, I'm doomed.
So that actually is something that I think is interesting in this context, which this gets into like a whole other field of philosophy, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, if we're going there, let's go there. But like, because earlier we were talking about, okay, everything has...
Especially crepe myrtle trees.
Especially crepe myrtles.
Because they can have wrinkles.
Whoa.
Yeah, I got a hair on my face.
Sorry.
Sorry, my ADHD is kicking in, guys. Go on.
But if everything is alive, if we're all made of the same star stuff...
Oh, yeah. We're stardust.
Yeah. Then what makes our existence different? What makes our consciousness the one that is conscious? And is there another level of consciousness that other beings have, whether they're alive, whether they're plants, whether they're inanimate and don't think? It's like, how can we prove that they don't have some level of understanding of the world? Like, we know that animals are conscious and live and think probably more similarly to life to us than
Yeah.
like a tree would, but
Yeah.
trees have a certain level of intelligence, and how do we say that's not conscious?
Yeah, like the octopus.
Yeah,
So
super smart.
Super smart. And they like to play, too.
Yeah.
Which is really cute.
Well, and like dolphins.
Oh, I don't like dolphins.
Oh, you don't?
No.
They're kind of scary, but they're really
kind
smart.
of-
Yeah. Yeah.
Dolphins, they don't respect personal space sometimes, guys.
No, they don't. They consent is
They
something.
they don't care about consent.
That is a human construct that I'm glad we have constructed.
Yes, I agree. That's a good one. That's a keeper.
Yeah, that one's a keeper. Yeah, but how do we
Yeah.
don't, like, you literally cannot prove that tree that crepe myrtle isn't feeling like
Yeah.
crepe myrtle things, you know? Like,
Yeah. And even, like, if you don't want to go as far as to say, oh, maybe they're sentient, I mean, at the end of the day, it's still existing.
yeah,
And for me, I feel like the idea that, you know, we're the only sentient being out there.
yeah,
I mean, humans are unique as far as we know in our ability to have, like, this self-reflection of, like,
Mhm.
like each of us is an I, you
I
know,
think
it has,
we're
like, a mindness.
Yeah, we're the only ones who are conscious of our own consciousness. I
Yes,
think that
yes.
has been proven.
Yeah, exactly. But, and that's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool.
But, you know, I don't think that warrants separating ourselves from the rest of the world
On
and
some
from nature.
supreme level.
Yeah, like that we're better.
Yeah.
If
Well,
anything, it just caused a bunch of anxiety for everyone.
If anything, we're
Yeah.
just really freaking out.
Yeah.
But I think a lot about, like, why is our idea of, like, brain the real idea of brain? Like, why can't other...
Oh, yeah.
do you...
The trees don't have, like, a brain.
But they still think.
Yeah.
It's just a different way of thinking.
Yeah.
More embodied, maybe, in the tree? I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
That might sound really weird. And
No, yeah. The thinking or whatever trees do
yeah.
is not really centralized
Yeah.
in, like, a brain or a nervous system.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone once told me long ago that that trees only grow up because other trees around them are growing up and because they want the most sunlight.
Oh, yeah. That actually makes sense.
I don't know if that's true.
They're just competitive.
Yeah. They're like, I want to be the tallest tree.
Huh. I wonder if that's true.
I don't know. I can't confirm. But
Comment
I mean,
below.
comment below. But, like, a lot of plants, you know, they'll, like, grow towards the sun.
Yeah.
There's a fancy word for it that I don't remember anymore, but
But there's an awareness there.
yeah.
Yeah.
Whatever that may look like, maybe the plant isn't aware that it's doing it, but, you know, it's responding to its environment, which is one of the core characteristics of consciousness.
Well, and if that's not what we do every single day,
Right.
just respond to our environment.
Yeah, it's just that we're aware that we're responding to our environment that I
Right.
think probably,
Sets us apart.
yeah, plants and trees probably don't have that I know of. But you never know.
Yeah, but interesting things. Okay, well, is there anything else before I get into my final questions that you feel like you want to say, get out there? There is something that we talked about that you're like, I didn't get to say this and it's really important, or you're like, this is something that I gotta say.
Not really. I'm just chilling. I'm having a fun time. I'm having a great time.
Okay, I'm glad you're having fun. Okay, final question, my dear friend Lauren. What is one word, which, of course, playing with this idea of language and what does it mean and blah, 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 blah. So I'm putting constraints on it. One word that describes how you're feeling right now.
Oh, man.
And it doesn't have to be perfect. It's more just like a way to kind of encapsulate the
Yeah.
last hour or so.
I would say probably fulfilling. You know, I love these types of conversations, and it's, you know, the types of friends that are willing to have these types of crazy mind-boggling conversations with me are far and few. So I really value our friendship, and I'm super glad that I got to do this today. So yeah, fulfilling.
That makes me really, really happy, and I'm just so grateful for you and our friendship. Our friendship. Okay, well,
Cool.
that is all I have.
That was so fun.
Thank you all so much for listening today and being here today, especially if you made it all the way to the end of the episode. It had been a hot second since I had seen Lauren, so it was just great to catch up and have this convo. If you want more info about today's episode, head to thecoherecollective.com and click on blog. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and you can subscribe to our newsletter on thecoherecollective.com so you never miss another episode. For updates on all of our stuff, follow us on Instagram at The Cohere Collective, and if you would like, you can follow me on Instagram at Lillian Reese Brown. If you feel so inclined, feel free to leave an honest review or rating. It helps me reach the people who will resonate with my content and then hopefully reach my goal of making the world a better place. Sharing the pod is also a great way to start conversations with important people in your life, so if you have someone that you think would enjoy this conversation, definitely send it over to them. Right now, I'm feeling kind of giddy, which is a weird word to use, but I was just listening back to this conversation with Lauren, and it was just such a joy, and getting to have conversations with my friends and people that I love is just so fun and epic, and I just feel really grateful that I get to continue doing this. Thank you all again so much for being here, and I hope you feel like you're living more coherently. I'll catch y'all next time. Love.